There's a tomb in China that nobody's allowed to open. It's been sitting there for over 2,000 years, sealed, untouched, waiting. Inside, according to ancient records, lies the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, the man who unified the country, built the Great Wall, created an empire. But here's the thing, we're not talking about some lost tomb that archaeologists are desperately searching for. We know exactly where it is. There's a massive earthen mound in Shaanxi Province. It rises 250 feet into the air. You can't miss it. The Chinese government knows it's there. Archaeologists know it's there. The whole world knows it's there. And yet nobody opens it. Why? The official reason is preservation. The technology isn't ready yet. Opening the tomb might damage what's inside. Better to wait. Better to be patient. But there's more to it than that. Because the ancient texts describe what's supposedly inside. And if even half of it is true, this isn't just a tomb. It's something else entirely. Rivers of mercury flowing like water. A ceiling studded with pearls representing the night sky. Crossbows rigged to fire at intruders. An entire palace complex buried underground. And in the centre of it all, the emperor himself, surrounded by everything he thought he'd need in the afterlife. Here's what gets me. The first emperor was obsessed with immortality. He sent expeditions across the oceans searching for the elixir of eternal life. He consumed mercury pills, believing they would make him live forever. They killed him instead. Mercury poisoning. He died at 49, and then they buried him in a tomb filled with rivers of mercury. The irony is almost too perfect. But is any of it real? Or is it just legend? Stories that grew bigger over centuries? That's what we're going to explore. What the ancient texts claim. What modern technology has revealed. And why, after all this time, the tomb remains sealed. Because sometimes the most fascinating mysteries aren't the ones we've forgotten. They're the ones we're actively choosing not to solve. If you're using this to fall asleep, that's exactly why I make these videos. Maybe subscribe and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I always check the comments. The ancient historian Sima Qian wrote about the tomb around 100 BCE. That's about 100 years after the emperor died. He described what the workers built. And his account is specific, detailed, almost too detailed. According to Sima Qian, the tomb chamber sits deep underground. Workers dug down until they hit water. Then they sealed the floor with molten bronze, creating a waterproof barrier. Inside, craftsmen recreated the entire empire in miniature. Rivers, the Yellow River, the Yangtze, all the major waterways. But these rivers didn't flow with water. They flowed with mercury, liquid metal circulating through mechanical pumps, moving, flowing. A perfect model of the empire's geography. The ceiling represented the heavens. Pearls and precious stones arranged to match the night sky. Constellations, planets. The cosmic order above, mirrored in the tomb below. And then there were the defences. Crossbows, rigged to fire automatically if anyone entered. Set to trigger if the seals were broken. The ancient world's version of a security system. Sima Qian also mentioned something else, something darker. When the emperor died, they buried him with companions, concubines who had no children. They went into the tomb alive. The workers who built the inner chambers went in too. Then the outer gates were dropped, sealing everyone inside. Nobody who knew the tomb's secrets was allowed to leave. Here's the thing. For centuries, scholars assumed most of this was exaggeration. Ancient historians had a tendency to embellish, make things sound more impressive than they actually were. Rivers of mercury, automatic crossbows, it sounded like fantasy. But then archaeologists started testing the soil around the tomb mound. In the 1980s, Chinese researchers took core samples, drilling down into the earth surrounding the burial chamber. They analysed the soil composition, looking for anything unusual. They found mercury, lots of it. The concentration levels were off the charts, way higher than natural background levels, and the mercury wasn't evenly distributed. It formed patterns, lines, paths, like rivers. The distribution matched the geography of ancient China, the Yellow River flowing north, the Yangtze flowing south, exactly as Sima Qian described. Suddenly the ancient text didn't sound so exaggerated anymore. Modern technology has revealed more. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetic surveys, remote sensing equipment, all without disturbing the tomb itself. The scans show a massive underground structure, multiple chambers, walls, corridors, a complex far larger than anyone expected. The tomb chamber itself appears to be about the size of a football field, and it sits inside an even larger underground palace. The scans also detected something else, anomalies in the readings, spots where the equipment picked up unusual signals. Could be metal objects, could be the crossbows Sima Qian mentioned, or something else entirely. But here's what really gets researchers excited. The mercury readings. If the mercury rivers are real, they represent something extraordinary. Mercury is toxic, deadly. It evaporates slowly, releasing vapors that poison anything nearby. The ancient Chinese knew this. They mined mercury, used it in various ways. They understood its properties, which means filling a sealed tomb with mercury wasn't just decorative, it was functional. The mercury vapors would kill bacteria, prevent decay, preserve everything inside. A 2,000-year-old preservation system. The emperor who obsessed over immortality, who died from mercury poisoning, ended up preserved by the same substance that killed him. The irony runs deeper, though. The emperor didn't just consume mercury pills, he believed mercury was magical, associated with transformation, with transcendence. The Taoist alchemists of his time thought mercury could transmute base metals into gold, could transform a mortal body into an immortal one. They were wrong about the immortality part, but they were right about mercury's preserving properties, just not in the way they thought. So if Sima Qian's account is accurate about the mercury, what about the rest? The crossbows, the buried workers, the miniature empire? Archaeologists can't verify those details without opening the tomb, and that's where things get complicated. The Chinese government's official position is clear. The tomb stays sealed until preservation technology improves, until they can guarantee that opening it won't damage what's inside. That sounds reasonable, responsible even. But there are other factors at play. The tomb site is sacred. It's part of China's national heritage. The first emperor is a controversial figure, brutal, tyrannical, but also foundational. He created the concept of a unified China. The name China comes from Qin, his dynasty. Opening his tomb isn't just an archaeological decision, it's a political one, cultural, symbolic. Then there's the practical concern, the mercury. If the tomb really contains rivers of mercury, opening it could be catastrophic. Mercury vapor is deadly. It doesn't take much to cause serious harm. The concentration levels detected in the soil suggest there could be tons of mercury inside, maybe more. Opening the tomb would release those vapors, potentially poisoning everyone nearby. The excavation team, nearby residents. The risk is real. Plus, there's the preservation issue. The tomb has been sealed for over 2,000 years. It exists in a stable environment, temperature controlled by the Earth itself, humidity constant, no light, no air circulation. The moment you break that seal, everything changes. Oxygen rushes in, humidity shifts, temperature fluctuates, organic materials that survived for millennia start to decay, colours fade, textiles disintegrate, wood crumbles. It happened with other tombs. The terracotta warriors were originally painted, bright colours, red, blue, green. When archaeologists excavated them, the paint started flaking off within minutes of exposure to air. They managed to preserve some of it, but much was lost. The technology has improved since then, but it's still not perfect, and the first emperor's tomb is far more complex than the warrior pits, higher stakes, more to lose, so the tomb waits, sealed, silent, holding its secrets. Meanwhile, archaeologists work on the periphery. They've excavated the surrounding areas, found incredible things. The terracotta army was just the beginning. There are bronze chariots, stone armour, acrobat figures, an entire underground empire surrounding the tomb itself. Each discovery adds context, confirms details from the ancient texts, makes the descriptions of the tomb interior seem more plausible, and the Mercury readings keep coming back positive. Every test, every survey, the patterns hold, the concentrations remain high. The evidence suggests Sima Qian was telling the truth, which means somewhere under that earthen mound, in a sealed chamber surrounded by rivers of liquid metal, the first emperor might still be there, preserved, waiting, exactly as he planned. While the burial chamber stays sealed, archaeologists keep working around it. They're finding new things, more warriors, different poses, different ranks. Each one adds another piece to the puzzle. The terracotta warriors weren't discovered by archaeologists. They were found by farmers digging a well. March 1974. A village in Shaanxi Province. 7 farmers needed water for their crops. They started digging. About 4 meters down, they hit something hard. Not rock, something else. They pulled up pieces of terracotta, broken pottery. Then they found a head. Life-sized, incredibly detailed. The face of a man, painted, realistic, staring up at them from the earth. The farmers didn't know what they'd found. They kept digging, more pieces, arms, torsos, legs, all made from terracotta clay, all broken, all buried about 2,200 years ago. They reported it to local authorities. Archaeologists arrived, started excavating properly. And what they found changed everything we thought we knew about the tomb. An entire army, buried in formation, thousands of life-sized warriors, each one unique, different faces, different expressions, different ranks, standing in battle formation, ready to fight. But here's what makes it extraordinary. They weren't just generic soldiers. Each warrior was an individual, different facial features. Some had beards, some didn't, different hairstyles, different ages. Some looked young, some looked weathered, battle-hardened. The level of detail is stunning. You can see fingernails, individual, strands of hair, the treads on the soles of their shoes, wrinkles in their uniforms. These weren't mass-produced. Each one was crafted individually, and they were originally painted. Bright colours, red, blue, green, purple. When archaeologists first uncovered them, traces of paint remained. But within minutes of exposure to air, the paint started flaking off, oxidizing, disappearing. Now most warriors are the grey colour of bare terracotta. That's one reason they're so careful about excavating more. The technology to preserve the paint doesn't exist yet. Better to leave them buried than to destroy them by exposing them too soon. So far they found 3 main pits. Pit 1 is the largest, about 14,000 square meters, contains roughly 6,000 warriors, infantry mostly, standing in rows, 11 columns across, facing east. Pit 2 is smaller, more specialized units, cavalry, archers, war chariots, a more complex formation, different military divisions working together. Pit 3 appears to be the command center. Only 68 warriors, but they're different, higher ranking, more elaborate uniforms. This was the headquarters, where the generals would have stood, and there are probably more pits. Ground-penetrating radar suggests other chambers, other formations, still buried, still waiting. The warriors stand in trenches. Wooden roofs once covered them, supported by timber beams, but over centuries the wood rotted, the roofs collapsed, crushing many of the warriors beneath tons of earth. That's why so many are broken, shattered by the weight of their own protection. Each warrior weighs about 400 pounds, solid terracotta, hollow inside but thick-walled, strong, built to last. And they weren't made in one piece. They were assembled. The legs were made separately. The torso, the arms, the hands, the head, all crafted individually, then put together. Like a puzzle. Different workshops made different parts. Some specialized in heads, some in bodies, some in hands. Then the pieces were brought together, assembled on site, fired in kilns, painted, positioned. The scale of production is mind-boggling. To create 8,000 warriors, you need organization, planning, an industrial process. This wasn't art. This was manufacturing. Historians estimate it took about 700,000 workers to build the entire tomb complex. Not just the warriors, everything. The mound, the walls, the underground palace, the defensive systems, all of it. Most were conscripts, forced labour, pulled from their farms, from their families, sent to work on the emperor's eternal resting place. Many died during construction, accidents, exhaustion, disease, and as Sima Qian mentioned, many were sealed inside when it was finished. The workers who knew the tomb's layout, the craftsmen who built the inner chambers, they couldn't be allowed to leave, couldn't be allowed to tell anyone what they'd seen. The warriors aren't just standing there, they're in formation, military ranks, different positions, different roles. The front rows are archers, no armour, light uniforms. They could move fast, fire quickly, then retreat behind the heavy infantry. Behind them stand the armoured soldiers, wearing lamellar armour, small plates of stone or leather laced together, flexible but protective. These warriors carry spears, swords, dagger axes. They're the main fighting force. Cavalry units stand ready, horses beside them, also made of terracotta, also life-sized. The horses are incredibly detailed. You can see their muscles, their manes, their teeth. Some have their mouths open, mid-whinny. The chariots are there too, bronze, ornate, pulled by 4 horses each, a driver, an archer, a commander. Mobile command centres that could direct the battle from anywhere on the field, and the generals. You can identify them by their uniforms, more elaborate, taller headgear, different postures. They stand slightly apart, commanding, watching over their troops. But here's what's really interesting. The warriors originally held real weapons, bronze swords, spears, crossbows, arrows, actual functional weapons, not terracotta replicas. Most of those weapons are gone now, looted, probably within years of the burial. Tomb robbers broke in, stole the bronze, left the warriors standing there, empty-handed, but some weapons remain, and they're remarkable. The bronze swords are still sharp, after 2,200 years. Some show a chromium coating, an anti-rust treatment, technology that wasn't supposed to exist until the 20th century. The crossbow triggers are precision-engineered, interchangeable parts, standardized components, mass production techniques. Again, centuries before Europe developed similar methods. The Qin dynasty didn't just unify China politically, they standardized everything: weights, measures, currency, writing, axle widths, and weapons. Every sword the same length, every arrow the same weight, every crossbow built to the same specifications. That's what the terracotta army represents. Not just military might, industrial organization, centralized control, the power to mobilize resources on a massive scale, and it's just the outer perimeter. The army guards the tomb. They're not inside it. They're outside, protecting it, standing between the emperor and the world. The actual burial chamber sits about a mile away, under the big mound, sealed, untouched. The warriors face outward, ready to defend against any threat. Which raises a question. What were they defending? What's really inside that central chamber? What did the emperor think he needed an army to protect? The ancient texts say treasures, gold, jade, pearls, the wealth of an empire. But maybe it's something else, something we haven't considered. Or maybe the army itself is the treasure, the real legacy, not what's buried in the tomb, but what stands outside it, the evidence of what humans can accomplish, the organization, the artistry, the scale. Each warrior is individual, a person, someone who lived, worked, fought, died, and now stands immortal, frozen in clay, waiting, always waiting. The emperor wanted immortality. He didn't get it. But his army did. They've outlasted empires, dynasties, civilizations. They're still standing, still ready, still guarding a tomb that nobody dares to open. Building something this massive required more than just labor. It required logistics, planning, supply chains that would make modern project managers weep. Think about the basics. You need clay, lots of it. High-quality terracotta clay that won't crack when fired. That means finding the right deposits, testing them, transporting tons of raw material to the workshops. You need kilns, big ones, hot enough to fire terracotta properly, around 1,000 degrees Celsius. Each kiln could probably handle a few warriors at a time, maybe 10, maybe 20. But you're making thousands, so you build multiple kilns, dozens of them, all operating simultaneously. Each one needs fuel, wood, enormous amounts of wood, which means logging operations, transportation networks, storage facilities, and you need artisans, skilled workers who know how to sculpt, how to assemble, how to fire clay properly. You can't just grab random farmers and expect them to create life-sized warriors with individual facial features. So where did they find these craftsmen? Some historians think they were recruited from across the empire. Each region had its own artistic traditions, different styles, different techniques. Bring them all together. Put them to work on the emperor's eternal army. Others think they trained workers specifically for this project. Apprenticeships, years of learning, creating a workforce that existed solely to build this tomb complex. Either way, you're looking at a massive organizational challenge, coordinating thousands of workers, different specialties, different tasks, all happening at once, all needing to come together perfectly. Consider the assembly process. You've got workshops making heads, different workshops making bodies, others making arms, hands, legs. All these pieces need to fit together. That requires standardization, templates, measurements, quality control, someone checking that the neck of Warrior 4582 will actually fit the head that Workshop 7 just finished. But they also needed variation, because every warrior looks different, so you can't just make one mold and use it repeatedly. You need variety, different faces, different expressions, different ages. Archaeologists think they use modular construction, maybe 8 basic face shapes. Then you add different noses, different ears, different beards, mix and match. Suddenly you've got thousands of unique combinations, same with the bodies, a few basic torso types, then different armor patterns, different hand positions, different leg stances, combine them in different ways. Each warrior ends up looking individual. It's brilliant. Mass production meets customization, industrial, Efficiency meets artistic detail, and then there's the painting. Every warrior was originally painted, full colour, realistic. Not just simple colours either. Complex pigments, purple, pink, green, blue, red, white, black. Chinese chemists have analysed the paint remnants. They found Egyptian blue, a synthetic pigment, very expensive, very difficult to make, and they used it liberally on thousands of warriors. They also found evidence of binding agents, something to make the paint stick to terracotta, something to make it last. Obviously it didn't work perfectly. The paint flaked off when exposed to air, but it lasted 2,200 years underground. That's not bad. The painting alone would have taken years. Each warrior needed multiple coats, different colours for different parts, the face, the armour, the clothing, the details. And someone had to decide what colours to use, what looked right, what looked realistic. That's not a decision you leave to random workers. That requires artistic direction, vision, consistency across thousands of figures. So you've got project managers, artists, engineers, chemists, logistics coordinators, accountants keeping track of materials, guards watching the workers, cooks feeding everyone, doctors treating injuries. It's not just a construction project, it's a city, a temporary city that existed solely to build a tomb, and it operated for decades. Estimates vary. Some historians say 30 years, others say 40. That's an entire generation. People were born, grew up, spent their whole lives working on this project. What was that like? Spending your entire existence building a tomb for someone else? Someone you'd never meet? Someone who'd be dead by the time you finished? Some workers probably took pride in it, creating something that would last forever. Something magnificent. Their names wouldn't be remembered, but their work would be. Others probably hated it. Forced labour, dangerous conditions, years away from home, from family, all for an emperor's vanity project. The historical records mention accidents, cave-ins, workers buried alive when tunnels collapsed, burns from the kilns, injuries from moving heavy materials, no safety regulations, no workers' compensation, just the brutal reality of ancient construction. And the security was intense, because the emperor didn't want anyone knowing the tomb's secrets. Workers were segregated, different teams working on different parts, nobody seeing the whole picture. The people making the warriors probably never saw the burial chamber. The people building the underground palace probably never saw the army. Compartmentalization, need-to-know basis, ancient information security. But some people had to know everything. The architects, the chief engineers, the project managers who coordinated all the different elements. They knew the layout, the defences, the treasures, everything. And according to Sima Qian, they were sealed inside when the tomb was finished, killed, buried with the emperor, their knowledge dying with them. Was that true? Or was it exaggeration? We don't know, but it fits with how the Qin dynasty operated. Ruthless, efficient, willing to sacrifice anything for the emperor's vision. The scale of resources devoted to this project is staggering. Historians estimate it consumed a significant portion of the empire's annual budget. For decades. Money that could have built roads, irrigated farmland, fed people during famines. Instead, it went underground. Into a tomb that nobody would ever see. That was the point. The emperor wanted to take it all with him. His wealth, his power, his army, everything. But here's what's interesting. The tomb wasn't just about the emperor. It was about the state, about demonstrating what the Qin dynasty could accomplish, the organizational capacity, the industrial might, the absolute control over resources and people. Other rulers built tombs, but nothing like this, nothing approaching this scale. This complexity, this ambition, it was a statement to the living, to rival kingdoms, to history itself. This is what we can do. This is our power. This is why you should fear us. And it worked. The tomb became legendary. Stories spread, exaggerated probably, but based on something real, something that actually existed underground. Even today, knowing what we know, it's hard to imagine. An entire palace complex, underground, sealed, waiting, rivers of mercury, mechanical crossbows, thousands of warriors standing guard. It sounds impossible, but the warriors are real. We've seen them, touched them, studied them. If that part is real, what else might be? The construction workforce eventually disbanded. Project finished, tomb sealed. Most workers probably went home, back to their farms, their families, their normal lives. But they carried stories, whispers about what they'd seen, what they'd built, stories that got passed down, generation after generation, becoming legend, becoming myth. And now archaeologists are trying to separate truth from fiction. What really exists down there? What's exaggeration? What's completely made up? The only way to know for certain is to open it. But that brings us back to the original question. Should they? Can they? What if opening it destroys what's inside? The warriors teach us something important. Patience matters. They waited 2,200 years to be discovered, found by accident, by farmers digging a well, not by archaeologists frantically searching. Maybe the tomb itself is waiting for the right time, the right technology, the right moment when we can open it without destroying it. Or maybe it should stay closed. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some secrets should remain buried. The workers who built it are long gone, their names forgotten, their lives unrecorded, but their work remains, standing, waiting. Guarding an emperor who thought he could take everything with him into eternity. He couldn't. Nobody can, but he left something behind anyway. Something that makes us wonder, makes us imagine, makes us dream about what else might be possible. The defences didn't stop at automatic crossbows. According to the historical records, the tomb builders thought of everything. Multiple layers of protection, each one designed to stop intruders, to preserve what lay inside. Start with the obvious. The tomb sits deep underground. Exact depth is unknown. But estimates range from 30 to 50 metres below the surface. That's a lot of earth to dig through. The burial chamber itself was carved from bedrock, then lined with stone, massive blocks fitted together. No mortar, just precision cutting and careful placement. The kind of stonework that creates waterproof seals through sheer weight and accuracy. Remember that bronze floor Sima mentioned? Modern soil analysis suggests it's real. Core samples show unusual metal concentrations at the estimated depth of the chamber floor. Bronze would make sense. It doesn't corrode easily. It's strong. It's waterproof when properly cast. So you've got a bronze-lined chamber, surrounded by stone walls, buried under meters of packed earth. Already that's pretty secure, but they didn't stop there. The entrance passages were designed as death traps. Multiple chambers, narrow corridors, places where crossbows could be mounted, where falling blocks could be triggered, where anyone trying to break in would face one obstacle after another. Chinese archaeologists have studied similar tombs from the same period. Smaller ones, less elaborate, but they show the same defensive thinking. Fake doors, dead ends, passages that loop back on themselves, all designed to confuse and delay tomb robbers. The crossbow traps weren't just legend. Archaeologists have found the mechanisms in other tombs, bronze triggers, stone counterweights, systems that could stay armed for centuries, simple physics, a balanced weight. A tripwire. When disturbed, the weight drops. The crossbow fires. Would they still work after 2,000 years? Probably not. Bronze corrodes, wood rots, strings decay. But the principle was sound, and in the first few centuries after burial, they would have been deadly. Then there's the mercury. Not just rivers of it inside the chamber, but mercury vapor. The liquid metal evaporates slowly. In a sealed space, that vapor builds up, becomes concentrated, toxic. Anyone breaking into the tomb would breathe it. Mercury poisoning doesn't kill instantly, but it's nasty. Tremors, confusion, organ damage. Death comes slowly, painfully. The builders knew about mercury's properties. They used it in alchemy, in medicine. They understood it was dangerous. That's probably why they chose it. Not just for symbolic rivers, but as a defense, a poison that would protect the emperor forever. Modern testing supports this. The soil around the tomb shows mercury concentrations 100 times higher than normal. That mercury has to come from somewhere. It's seeping up from below, slowly, over millennia, which suggests there's a lot of it down there. But here's something interesting. The distribution isn't uniform. Mercury levels are highest in certain areas, lower in others. This matches what Sima Qian described. Rivers flowing in specific patterns, concentrated in channels, not spread evenly throughout. That level of detail in the historical account is striking. How would Sima Qian know the exact layout unless he had access to construction records, or talk to people who'd seen the plans? The outer defences were just as elaborate. The entire tomb complex covers 56 square kilometres. That's not a typo. 56 square kilometres, an area larger than Manhattan. Within that space, archaeologists have found multiple walls, defensive barriers, guard posts. The whole complex was fortified like a military installation, because in a way it was. An army stood guard, the Terracotta warriors. And behind them, human guards, living soldiers, stationed around the tomb. Historical records mention a garrison. Troops assigned permanently to tomb defense. Their descendants lived in the area for generations, guarding, watching, making sure nobody disturbed the emperor's rest. The tomb mound itself is artificial. Workers piled earth into a pyramid shape, layer after layer packed tight, planted with trees to prevent erosion. The roots helped hold everything together, but that mound does more than mark the location. It's part of the defense. The weight of all that earth presses down on the burial chamber, helps keep it sealed, makes tunneling from above nearly impossible. Some researchers think there might be false chambers, decoys, empty rooms that look important but contain nothing, all designed to waste tomb robbers' time, to make them think they'd found the burial when they hadn't. This was common practice in ancient China. Important tombs often had multiple chambers, some real, some fake. You'd break in, find treasure, think you'd succeeded, never realize the actual burial was somewhere else entirely. Has anyone tried to break in? Probably. The tomb has sat there for over 2,000 years. Someone must have attempted it. But here's the thing. We haven't found evidence of successful tomb robbery. No ancient accounts of treasure recovered from the first emperor's tomb. No artifacts that clearly came from inside the burial chamber showing up in collections or historical records. That's unusual. Most ancient Chinese tombs were looted, sometimes within years of burial. Tomb robbery was practically an industry. Professional thieves, organized gangs. They knew which tombs were worth targeting. They had tools, techniques, experience. The first emperor's tomb would have been the ultimate prize. Everyone knew it contained incredible wealth, the treasures of an entire empire. So why wasn't it robbed? Maybe the defences actually worked. The crossbows, the mercury, the maze of passages, the sheer difficulty of breaking through multiple layers of protection. Maybe it was simply too dangerous, too difficult, not worth the risk, or maybe someone did break in, took what they could carry, resealed the entrance, left no trace. We'd never know unless we opened it ourselves. There's another possibility, a darker one. Maybe people tried, maybe they got in, and maybe they never came back out, killed by the defences, trapped in the maze of passages, poisoned by mercury vapour, their bodies still down there, lost in the darkness. The historical records mention one attempt, during the chaos that followed the Qin dynasty's collapse. Rebel forces led by Jiang Yu supposedly broke into the outer chambers. They looted what they could find, burned some of the wooden structures, caused damage. But they didn't reach the burial chamber. Either they couldn't find it, or they couldn't break through the defences, or they tried and failed. The records aren't clear. What is clear is that the main burial chamber remained sealed. Whatever Shang Yu's forces found, it wasn't the Emperor's body. It wasn't the rivers of Mercury. It wasn't the heart of the tomb. Modern technology has added new layers of protection. The Chinese government declared the entire area a protected archaeological site. Guards, fences, surveillance. You can't just wander in with a shovel, but the ancient defences remain, waiting, unchanged, still doing what they were designed to do over 2,000 years ago. Protect the Emperor, guard his secrets, keep the living world away from the realm of the dead. And they're working. The tomb stays sealed, the Emperor rests undisturbed, the defences hold. For now, air isn't the only enemy. When archaeologists talk about why they won't open the tomb, they mention preservation technology. They talk about humidity control, temperature regulation, ways to prevent artifacts from degrading when exposed to modern air. But there's another concern, one that's more immediate, more dangerous: mercury. Remember those rivers Sima Xian described? Liquid metal flowing through channels? Modern soil tests confirm high mercury levels around the tomb, way higher than normal, about 100 times the background concentration. That mercury came from somewhere. It's seeping up from below, slowly, over millennia, which means there's a lot of it down there. But mercury does something else, something the ancient builders understood perfectly. It evaporates. Leave mercury sitting in a container, it doesn't just stay liquid. Some of it turns to vapour, invisible, odourless, toxic. In an open space, that vapour disperses, spreads out, becomes diluted, not much of a threat. But in a sealed chamber, underground, with no ventilation for 2,000 years, the vapour builds up, gets concentrated, reaches levels that would kill you within hours of breathing it. This isn't speculation. Scientists have run the calculations. Based on the estimated volume of mercury in the tomb, based on the size of the burial chamber, based on evaporation rates over 2 millennia. The math is grim. Anyone opening that chamber would face mercury vapour at concentrations far beyond lethal levels. Not just dangerous, not just risky, absolutely deadly. You'd need serious protection, full hazmat suits, self-contained breathing systems, the kind of equipment used for toxic waste cleanup. And even then, one small breach in your suit would be catastrophic. Mercury poisoning is nasty. It attacks your nervous system, causes tremors, confusion, slurred speech, memory loss. In high concentrations, it damages your lungs, your kidneys, your brain. The symptoms can take hours to appear. You might not realize you've been exposed until it's too late. By the time you feel sick, the damage is done, and it's cumulative. Mercury builds up in your body, stays there. Each exposure adds to the total. Eventually you reach a threshold. Your organs start failing. The first emperor knew about mercury's properties. Chinese alchemists had been working with it for centuries. They used it in medicine, in rituals, in attempts to create the elixir of life. They understood it was powerful, transformative. They associated it with immortality because it seemed to exist between states, liquid like water, heavy like metal, shiny like silver. It defied normal categories. But they also knew it was poison. That's probably why they chose it for the tomb, not just for symbolic rivers, not just to represent the geography of the empire, but as protection, a barrier between the living and the dead. Anyone trying to break in would breathe it, get sick, die. The emperor would be protected forever by the same substance he'd consumed trying to live forever. The irony runs deep. Modern archaeologists face a dilemma. How do you open a chamber filled with toxic vapor? How do you explore it safely? One option is remote technology. Robots, cameras, sensors. Send machines in first. Let them map the space. Analyze the air. Test for hazards. China has developed specialized equipment for this. Small drilling robots that can create tiny access holes. Feed cameras through. Take air samples. All without disturbing the main structure. They've used this technology on other tombs. Smaller ones, less important. Testing the methods. Refining the approach. But even with robots, you face problems. Mercury vapor is corrosive. It damages electronics, coats camera lenses, interferes with sensors. You'd need equipment specifically designed to handle it, and you still need to decide what to do with the vapor itself. You can't just vent it into the atmosphere. That would be an environmental disaster. Mercury is persistent. It spreads, contaminates soil, gets into water, enters the food chain. So you'd need containment systems, ways to capture the vapor, neutralize it, dispose of it safely, all while working underground, in a confined space, around priceless artifacts. The technical challenges are enormous. Some researchers have proposed a different approach. Don't open the main chamber at all. Instead, explore the outer chambers first. The ones that are less contaminated, less dangerous. Build up knowledge gradually. Learn about the tomb's construction, its layout, its defenses. Each discovery helps you understand what you'll face when you finally reach the burial chamber. This is what they're doing now. Excavating the terracotta warriors, studying the tomb complex, mapping the underground structures, all preparation for the eventual opening. But it's slow work. Decades slow, maybe centuries slow, and some people wonder if it's worth the risk at all. What if we opened the chamber and found nothing? What if tomb robbers got there first? What if the historical accounts were exaggerated? What if there are no rivers of mercury, no pearl-studded ceiling, no treasures beyond imagination? What if it's just an empty room and a corpse? The disappointment would be crushing. All that preparation, all that technology, all that careful planning, for nothing. But the opposite scenario is almost worse. What if everything Sima Qian described is real? What if the tomb is intact? What if it contains artifacts that would rewrite our understanding of ancient China? Opening it would be like opening Tutankhamun's tomb, but bigger, more significant, more dangerous. And we might not be ready for that responsibility. The mercury problem goes beyond just the vapor. The liquid metal itself is unstable. It's been sitting there for 2,000 years, in channels, in containers, in whatever system the builders created. What happens when you disturb it? When you change the pressure? When you introduce fresh air? Mercury can react with other materials. It forms amalgams with metals. It corrodes. It spreads. Opening the tomb might trigger chemical reactions we can't predict. And if those rivers really are flowing through mechanical pumps, what state are those pumps in? Are they still intact? Or have they corroded, broken down, released their mercury into the chamber? We don't know. We can't know without opening it. Chinese officials have made their position clear. The tomb stays sealed until they're absolutely certain they can preserve what's inside, until the technology exists to handle every possible scenario, until they're ready. That might be 10 years from now, might be 50, might be 100. The Emperor has waited this long, he can wait longer, but the Mercury isn't waiting. It's seeping up through the soil, spreading, slowly contaminating the area around the tomb. Scientists monitor it constantly, testing soil samples, measuring concentrations, tracking how it moves through the earth. So far it's contained. The levels outside the immediate tomb area are normal, safe, but that could change. Mercury is persistent, patient. It doesn't break down. It just spreads. Eventually they might have to open the tomb whether they're ready or not to explore it, not to study it, but to contain the mercury before it becomes an environmental hazard. That would be the ultimate irony. The Emperor's final defense becoming the reason his tomb gets opened. The poison that was supposed to protect him forever, forcing us to disturb his rest. Protection has a cost. The crossbows would have killed intruders. The mercury would have poisoned them. The maze of passages would have trapped them. But those same defences now prevent legitimate archaeology. They make it dangerous to study, risky to explore, nearly impossible to open safely. The Emperor succeeded. His tomb remains sealed, his body undisturbed, his secrets hidden. But the protection comes with a price, and eventually that price might be paid in environmental damage, in contaminated soil, in mercury spreading beyond the tomb's boundaries, the dead protecting themselves from the living trying to protect themselves from the dead, and between them, rivers of poison, waiting, building up, seeping slowly toward the surface. People have known about mercury's dangers for a long time, but just how dangerous is it really? Most of us think of mercury as that weird silver liquid in old thermometers. It rolls around like little metal beads. Looks cool, right? But if you break a thermometer, people tell you not to touch it. There's a good reason for that. Even small amounts can be harmful. The reason is that mercury is what scientists call a heavy metal. It's dense. It doesn't break down easily. Once it gets into your body, it sticks around. It moves through your organs and settles in your brain, your kidneys, your liver. Over time, it builds up. That's when the real trouble starts. Now, there are three main ways mercury can hurt you. There's liquid mercury, like what you find in thermometers. There's mercury vapor, which is invisible gas that comes off liquid mercury. And there are mercury compounds, which are created when mercury mixes with other chemicals. All of them are hazardous, but vapor is the most dangerous in a closed space. Most stories about mercury poisoning come from history. The phrase "mad as a hatter" comes from hat makers in the 1800s. They used mercury nitrate to shape felt hats. The workers breathed in the fumes every day. Over time, they started shaking, slurring their words, and acting confused. People thought they'd gone mad, but it was mercury poisoning all along. The symptoms can be subtle at first. Maybe you feel tired. Your hands shake a little. You have trouble remembering things. Then it gets worse. You might feel anxious, start having trouble walking, or even lose the ability to talk. In extreme cases, your body just shuts down. That's why health experts are so strict about mercury today. Let's talk numbers. For mercury vapor, the safe limit is set very low. Health agencies say you shouldn't breathe more than 0.1 milligrams per cubic meter over a long period. Inside a sealed tomb, the vapor could be thousands of times higher than this. That's not a slow poison. That's instant danger. Just a few breaths would be enough to cause permanent harm. There's another reason mercury is scary. You can't see it, smell it, or taste it. It moves through the air, especially in a closed space like an underground tomb. You could walk in, feel fine, and not realize you were in trouble until hours later. By then, it's too late. The damage is done. And it's not only people who are at risk. Mercury is terrible for the environment. If it leaks into the soil, plants absorb it. If it ends up in water, fish take it in. Then animals eat the plants and fish. People eat the animals. The mercury keeps moving up the food chain, getting stronger each time. That's why pregnant women are told not to eat certain types of fish. Mercury can harm the developing brains of babies. So if you're looking at a tomb with massive amounts of mercury, underground, it's not just a problem for archaeologists, it's a problem for everyone nearby. The mercury could eventually reach crops, rivers, even cities. That's why scientists take it so seriously. Let's get a little more technical, but I'll keep it simple. How does mercury end up as vapor? Turns out, even at room temperature, mercury slowly turns into a gas. The process is called evaporation. It's the same thing that happens when water dries up, just much slower. But over thousands of years, even slow evaporation adds up. Inside a sealed tomb with no wind or sunlight, mercury vapor has nowhere to go. It gets thicker and thicker. It fills every corner. If you open the door, the vapor would rush out, mixing with the fresh air. Anyone nearby could breathe it in. Even if you wore a mask, it might not be enough. Only full protective suits and special breathing equipment would keep you safe. Now you might think, why not just let it air out before going in? Easy, right? Not so fast. Mercury vapor is heavy. It doesn't just float away, and if you try to vent it, you risk spreading the poison to the outside world. It could settle on the ground, get washed into streams, or stick to clothing and tools. The cleanup would be a nightmare. When scientists first figured out how much mercury might be in the tomb, they were stunned. The numbers were off the charts. Soil samples from the area show levels far above anything you'd find in normal ground. Some estimates say there could be as much as several tons of mercury sealed away. Imagine a swimming pool filled with liquid metal. That's the scale we're talking about. There's also the question of how the ancient builders handled the mercury. They knew it was dangerous. They wore masks while working with it, according to some old records. But they also believed it had magical powers. They used it in medicines, even though it could be deadly. It's strange to think about. A substance that promised eternal life, but often brought an early death. Some historians think the use of mercury was meant to scare off robbers. Picture yourself sneaking into a tomb, only to find rivers of shining liquid metal. You'd probably turn around and run. Even if you tried to steal from the tomb, the poison would get you before you made it out. It was the perfect trap. But the trap doesn't just work on tomb robbers, it works on everyone. That's the problem archaeologists face today. They want to study the tomb, but they can't do it safely. Not yet. The risk isn't just losing artifacts, it's losing human lives. Let's try to imagine what would happen if someone ignored the warnings and went inside. They'd walk into a beautiful ancient chamber. Maybe they'd see treasures, statues, even jewels glittering in the torchlight. But with every breath, they'd be taking in invisible poison. At first, they might feel fine. Maybe a little lightheaded, a little dizzy. Over time, their vision would blur. Their hands would shake, they'd have trouble speaking. Soon they'd collapse. If help didn't come right away, they wouldn't make it out. That's not an exaggeration. It's happened before in other places. In the 1800s, gold miners in California used mercury to separate gold from dirt. They poured liquid mercury into pans and swished it round with their bare hands. Many died young. Some went mad, losing their ability to function. Scientists later found mercury in their bones, still there decades after they died. There are even stranger stories. In the 1950s and 60s, a city in Japan called Minamata suffered one of the worst mercury disasters in history. A factory dumped mercury waste into the bay. Fish soaked up the poison. People ate the fish. Thousands got sick. Hundreds died. Babies were born with severe disabilities. The town is still dealing with the aftermath today. All of this shows how serious Mercury can be. It's not just a problem for the people who open the tomb. It's a problem for everyone around it, and for years to come. So, what can be done about it? Scientists have come up with a few options. One idea is to use robots. Machines can go where humans can't, but building a robot that can survive in a toxic ancient tomb isn't easy. Mercury vapor damages electronics. It can corrode metal parts. Cameras fog up. Lenses get covered in a thin film of mercury. Even the best machines struggle in those conditions. Another plan is to drill tiny holes into the tomb, not to open it fully, but just enough to insert sensors and cameras. These tools can measure the air, check mercury levels, and send back images. But even this is risky. Drilling could release a burst of toxic vapor. There's also the chance of damaging priceless artifacts by accident. Maybe the safest option is to wait. Technology gets better every year. Scientists are working on new materials that resist mercury, better robots, better suits. Maybe in 10 or 20 years, there will be a way to do it safely. But while we wait, the mercury keeps moving. It's not going away. Every year, a little more seeps out. This creates a strange situation. The thing that was meant to protect the tomb is now turning into a threat for the living. The old poison is slowly leaking out, and sooner or later someone will have to deal with it. Not for the sake of treasure, or history, or curiosity, just to keep people and the environment safe. Let's step back and think about what this all means. The ancient builders wanted to create something that would last forever. They used the best defences they could imagine. They probably never thought that their greatest weapon would become a modern hazard. But that's what happened. It's not just about one tomb. Mercury is a problem all over the world. In old mines, in factories, in rivers and lakes. The lesson is simple. What we bury doesn't stay buried. Sooner or later, it comes back. The story of Mercury and the Emperor's tomb is a reminder. Sometimes the past protects itself in ways we don't expect. Sometimes the dangers are invisible. Sometimes the thing we fear most is the thing we can't see or smell or touch. It's just there, waiting. And there's another layer. The mercury isn't just a chemical or a poison, it's a symbol. The ancient world saw it as mysterious, even magical. Something between worlds, liquid but also metal, shiny but deadly. They believed it could give life and also take it away. That duality is still with us. Scientists today have to respect the power of the past. They can't just dig up history without thinking about the risks. Every action has a consequence. Every ancient defense has a modern price. But there's also wonder in all of this. The fact that we're even talking about a tomb sealed for over 2,000 years. That we can test the soil and detect poisons left by kings and craftsmen. That we can imagine rivers of liquid metal shining in torchlight, hidden under a mountain of earth. It's wild, honestly, and there's no easy answer. Should we open the tomb? Should we leave it sealed forever? Should we risk lives and the environment for the sake of history? These are hard questions, and nobody has the perfect solution. What's certain is that the mercury isn't going anywhere on its own. If the tomb is ever disturbed, by accident or on purpose, the problem will need to be solved. Not just for archaeologists, but for everyone who lives nearby. That's the real hazard. It's not just about the past or the secrets buried with the Emperor. It's about our responsibility to the future. If we act carelessly, we could end up causing harm that lasts generations. If we act too slowly, the damage could happen anyway. In the end, the mercury is a challenge, a puzzle, something left behind by people who couldn't have known what it would become, and now it's up to us to figure out what to do next. It's strange to think that a drop of liquid metal, something that fascinated and frightened people for thousands of years, could decide the fate of one of the world's greatest treasures. But that's where we are. The tomb waits. The Mercury waits. The danger is real, but so is the opportunity. One day someone will unlock the secrets beneath that mound. But first we have to find a way to deal with the poison that guards it. And that brings us to a deeper question. Is it right to disturb the ancient dead, even for science? Is there a price we shouldn't pay, no matter what secrets are hidden underground? These are ethical questions. They go beyond science and technology. They ask what kind of ancestors we want to be, and what kind of world we want to leave behind. Because the past isn't just a mystery to solve, it's a warning, a lesson. Sometimes it's a trap set by people long gone, a test for those who come after. And in this case, the test is a river of invisible poison, waiting quietly in the dark. Let's take a step back from all the danger and the science. Let's ask a deeper question. Why do we even want to open up ancient tombs in the first place? What are we hoping to find, and is it worth it? This isn't just about technology or about Mercury or about traps. It's about choices. What do we owe the past? What do we owe the people who came before us? And what do we owe the people who will come after? Archaeology isn't just digging up old stuff. It's a conversation with history. Every time someone uncovers something, an old coin, a broken pot, a skeleton, they're reaching across time. They're asking questions. Who were you? What did you believe? What did you fear? What did you hope for? Sometimes the answers are clear. Other times they're just more mysteries, more puzzles. When it comes to a tomb like this, the stakes are much higher. We're not just talking about a few artifacts. We're talking about the final resting place of a man who shaped an entire country. We're talking about secrets that have been hidden for over 2,000 years. There's a weight to that, a kind of responsibility. And here's where it gets complicated. Different cultures have different views on death and the dead. In some places, disturbing a grave, any grave, is considered a huge offence. It's not just about respect for the dead, it's about the living too, about what it means to let people rest, about what it means to move on. In other cultures, digging up the past is seen as a way to honour ancestors, to learn from them, to keep their memory alive. China's relationship with its own history is unique. There's pride in the ancient past. There's also a sense of guardianship. The tomb of Qin Shi Huang isn't just a curiosity. It's a national treasure. It's protected by law. Only the highest levels of the government can decide what happens to it. That alone tells you how seriously it's taken. And there's another layer too. Archaeology has a dark side. It's not always about careful science and respectful study. Sometimes it's about treasure hunting, about greed, about breaking into graves, stealing what's valuable, and selling it to the highest bidder. This has happened all over the world for centuries. Ancient Egypt, the Mayan cities, Roman ruins, Chinese tombs. The damage from this kind of looting is permanent. Once something is stolen or destroyed, it's gone forever. That's why modern archaeologists are so cautious. They know that opening a tomb isn't just about finding objects. It's about preserving meaning. It's about context. Every artifact tells a story, but only if you know where it came from, how it was placed, what was around it. If you rush in, if you grab things just to show them off, you lose that story. You lose the chance to really understand. The tomb of the first emperor is a perfect example of this tension. On one hand, it's a goldmine for history. It could rewrite what we know about ancient China. It could answer questions that have puzzled experts for generations. On the other hand, it's a sacred space. It's a sealed room meant to last forever. Breaking that seal isn't just a technical problem, it's an ethical one. Let's look at some real-world examples. In the 1920s, archaeologists opened the tomb of King Tutankhamun in Egypt. It was a huge event. The media went wild. People were fascinated by the treasures, the jewellery, the golden mask. But the process wasn't perfect. Artifacts were removed quickly. Some were damaged. The tomb itself was changed forever. The colour of the walls faded. The air inside shifted. The curse of the pharaohs became a headline, part superstition, part warning. The lesson from King Tut's tomb is simple. Once you open a sealed space, you can't ever put things back exactly the way they were. Air, light, even footsteps, everything has an impact. Sometimes the damage is slow, paint flakes off, wood cracks. Sometimes it happens right away. And sometimes you don't even know what you've lost until years later. Now, let's go to South America. In Peru, there's a tradition of ancestor worship. Families used to keep the mummies of their ancestors in special houses. They would bring them out for festivals. They believed the dead could help the living and that the living could help the dead. When Spanish conquerors arrived, they destroyed many of these burial sites. They saw them as heathen or superstitious. Entire cultures were changed just because outside forces didn't understand the meaning behind the tombs. That's another lesson. When you open a tomb, you're not just uncovering objects, you're stepping into someone else's beliefs, their world, their fears and hopes. If you don't understand those beliefs, you risk disrespecting them, sometimes in ways you can't even imagine. Back in China, there's a long history of respecting the dead. The word for ancestor carries weight. It's not just about family, it's about the whole society. The emperor wasn't just a ruler. He was a link between earth and heaven. His tomb wasn't just a grave. It was a symbol of his power, his connection to the universe, his place in the story of the world. So, when archaeologists ask, should we open the tomb? They're really asking a big question. Who gets to decide what happens to history? Is it the scientists, the government, the people who live near the tomb? Or maybe the descendants of those who built it? There's no easy answer. In some cases, local communities have fought to keep tombs closed. In others, they've helped open them, hoping for jobs, tourism, or a sense of pride. Sometimes the decision is made far away, by people who have never even seen the site. And then there's the question of what's lost when a tomb stays. Sealed. Knowledge. Stories. Insights into how people lived, what they valued, what they feared. Every year, new technology makes it possible to learn more without digging. Ground-penetrating radar, 3D imaging, chemical analysis. But there are limits. Some secrets stay hidden unless you're willing to open the door. Here's another thing to think about. The longer a tomb stays sealed, the more it changes on the inside. Air pressure shifts. Chemicals interact. Artifacts may rot or corrode or collapse. Waiting too long can be just as risky as rushing in. It's a race against time, but the finish line isn't clear. And then, of course, there's the issue of risk. Not just to people, but to the world around the tomb. Mercury, as we talked about, is a real danger. But so are diseases. There have been cases where old tombs contained bacteria or spores that made people sick. In the 1920s, when Tutankhamun's tomb was opened, several workers died of mysterious illnesses. Was it a curse? Or just ancient mold and bacteria? We still don't really know. This is why archaeologists today have strict rules, protective gear, air filters, quarantine procedures. They treat new tombs almost like crime scenes, or even like alien planets. Every action is planned, every risk measured. But even the best plan can go wrong. You can't control everything. Sometimes the past fights back in ways you don't expect. Let's talk about ethics for a minute. There's a saying among archaeologists, first, do no harm. It's borrowed from medicine. The idea is simple. If you can't guarantee that your actions will help, then maybe you shouldn't act at all. Sometimes, the bravest thing is to wait, to let the past rest, at least until you're sure you can do it justice. But there's also a duty to knowledge, to the truth, to the stories that haven't been told yet. Some historians argue that leaving the tomb closed is a kind of theft too, a theft from the future. What if there's something inside that could change how we see the world? What if there's a message from the past waiting to be heard? It's a real dilemma. Open the tomb and you risk damage, disrespect, even danger. Leave it sealed and you risk losing knowledge forever. There's no simple formula, no right answer that fits every case. Let's get practical for a moment. Around the world, there are guidelines for how to handle ancient sites. UNESCO, the United Nations Group for Culture, has a set of rules. They say you should always include local voices, always think about the impact on the community, always weigh the risks and benefits. In China, the laws are even stricter. Government approval is needed for every dig. Artifacts can't be taken out of the country. Everything is watched closely. That's why, even though scientists have the tools and the curiosity, they haven't rushed to open the emperor's tomb. They're waiting until they're sure they can do it, safely and with respect. It's not just about protecting objects, it's about protecting meaning. There are also spiritual questions. Some people believe that disturbing a tomb can bring bad luck, or even disaster. It's not just superstition, it's a way of saying that the past isn't just dead. It has power, it deserves respect. When you break a seal, you break a kind of promise. You cross a line. There's an old story in China. It goes like this. If you disturb the emperor's rest, his spirit will not be pleased. The land itself might suffer. Crops could fail. Rivers could flood. People could get sick. Whether you believe in curses or not, the story has a point. Actions have consequences. Even if the danger isn't magical, it can still be real. So what's the solution? Some people suggest compromise. Open the tomb, but do it slowly. Use robots, not people. Take samples, not treasures. Study, but don't destroy. Others say, wait as long as it takes. Let technology catch up. Let the experts build better tools. Maybe someday we'll be able to explore the tomb without causing any harm at all. And some say, just leave it alone. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Maybe the lesson is patience. Maybe it's humility. Knowing what we don't know and being okay with that. Here's a thought that comforts me. The tomb exists whether we open it or not. The past is still there, waiting. We don't have to rush. Time moves slowly underground. The secrets aren't going anywhere. But there's another way to look at it. Every generation faces its own mysteries, its own choices. Maybe our job isn't just to find answers. Maybe it's to ask the right questions, to weigh the risks, to respect the people who came before and the people who will come after. Think about what it means to be a good ancestor. Not just for your family, but for everyone. What kind of world do you want to leave behind? One that values knowledge but also respect. One that learns from the past but doesn't destroy it. Archaeology at its best is about balance, curiosity and caution, discovery and preservation. Every site is a test, every tomb is a question, and every answer leads to more questions. The story of the Emperor's tomb isn't just about history, it's about us, what we value, what we're willing to risk, what we're willing to leave alone. And this is where it gets really interesting, because sometimes the hardest choice is to wait, to trust that the right moment will come, to believe that the past will reveal itself when we're ready. For now, the tomb stays sealed. These secrets stay hidden. The debate continues, but the lesson remains. The past is powerful. It deserves care. It deserves thought. And sometimes, the greatest respect we can show is patience. That's the real heart of ethical archaeology. Not just what we find, but how we find it, and what we choose to do next as science pushes forward and technology gets better. The questions will keep coming. but so will the warnings, from the ancient builders, from the land, from the silent tomb itself. The choice is ours, and the world will remember what we decide. Let's step into the world of what if. What if all those wild stories about the Emperor's tomb are actually true? Not just legends, not just exaggerations. Imagine, for a minute, every single detail described in the ancient records is real. The rivers of Mercury, the constellations on the ceiling, the booby traps, the bronze, the sacrifices. What would that mean, not just for history, but for how we see the ancient world? First, let's talk about the Mercury rivers. Most people hear about that and think, no way, that can't be real. But if it is, then we're looking at a level of engineering that's almost unbelievable for 2,200 years ago. Mercury isn't easy to mine or transport even today. To fill channels with enough liquid mercury to make rivers, you'd need huge mines. You'd need hundreds, maybe thousands of workers. You'd need a way to keep all that mercury moving, or at least looking like it moves. How could they possibly have done this? The ancient texts say they used pumps and clever designs to keep the mercury circulating. Maybe they had wheels or hidden chambers that let the metal flow from one part of the tomb to another. That kind of setup would take serious planning. It would mean the Emperor's builders knew a lot about metals, chemistry, and how to keep things sealed up tight. And if the stories are true, it also means they didn't care about cost. Mercury was rare, hard to get. It wasn't like gold, which anyone could see and value. Mercury is heavy, toxic, and hard to work with. Filling a tomb with it isn't just showing off wealth, it's making a statement. I am above normal limits. Even death can't touch me. But the idea goes deeper than that. In ancient China, Mercury had a special meaning. It was seen as magical. People thought it could help you live forever. It could change shape, flow like water, but never rot. Putting it in the tomb was a way of saying, this place is outside of time. The rules don't apply here. Now picture the ceiling of the tomb. The ancient writers say it's studded with gems to look like the night sky, pearls for stars, coloured stones for the planets. Imagine lying on your back looking up at a sky that never shifts, never clouds over, never fades. That would have been breathtaking. It's a perfect copy of the universe, locked underground. That ceiling would have meant something too. The Emperor wasn't just a ruler. He was the bridge between earth and heaven. The sky above, full of stars, was a map of fate. Lining the ceiling with pearls and stones was a way to bring that power down, to control it, to make sure the Emperor's spirit could travel anywhere, even after death. And then there's the idea of the traps. The crossbows rigged to fire when someone breaks a seal, the fake doors and dead ends. If those really exist, then this tomb isn't just a grave. It's a fortress. A puzzle box. The Emperor's message would be clear. Stay out. Only the worthy may enter. It's protection, but also a warning. Now let's ask, why go to all this trouble? If the stories are true, what does that say about the people who built the tomb? First, they must have believed in the afterlife, not as a vague idea, but as something real and physical. The Emperor expected to rule forever. He wanted everything he had in life to follow him into whatever came next. So, the tomb becomes a kind of insurance. It's not just about honour or memory, it's about power. In their minds, whoever controls the tomb controls the future of the family, the country, maybe the cosmos itself. If we take the sacrifices seriously, the concubines, the workers, the guards, then the tomb is also a place of fear. Not just for outsiders, but for those who built it. Imagine being a craftsman knowing your work is the last thing you'll ever do, or a concubine chosen to follow the Emperor into death. The whole project becomes a lesson in loyalty and obedience. It says, nothing is more important than the will of the ruler. Not even life itself. That's a hard truth. It's easy to romanticize ancient history, to focus on the art, the beauty, the mystery. But if every part of the legend is true, there's darkness mixed in with the glory. The tomb is a wonder, but it's also a warning. Let's talk about the engineering for a second. If the bronze floor is real, poured molten metal sealing out water, then the builders were thinking on a scale most people can't even imagine. Bronze isn't easy to make. It takes copper, tin, high heat, careful mixing. Pouring enough to cover a whole chamber would take planning, supplies, and a ton of fuel, and it works. Bronze doesn't rust like iron. It holds up underground. It keeps water out. If the emperor's body is still preserved, it's probably because of that bronze barrier, plus the dry air and the sealed stone. If we imagine the tomb as a model of the empire, with rivers, mountains, cities, all in miniature, then we have to admit this wasn't just a grave, it was a statement. This is the world, and I am at the center of it. The emperor wanted to carry his empire with him everywhere, forever. Think about the terracotta warriors. Thousands of life-sized figures, each one different. Officers, soldiers, archers, even horses and chariots. If the legends are true, the tomb itself is filled with even more. Musicians, dancers, servants, animals. It's a whole world frozen in clay and stone. Why go this far? Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was love of power. Maybe it was both. The emperor saw himself as the axis of everything. When he died, he wanted the balance of the universe to follow him. The tomb is a way to control fate, even from beyond the grave. Now let's imagine the traps are still active. Even after all these years, the crossbows are loaded. The passages are lined with deadly surprises. That would make the tomb the most secure place in the ancient world. It would also be a message to anyone thinking of breaking in. Don't even try. You'll pay the price. If you're an archaeologist, this changes everything. Most ancient tombs have been robbed, sometimes within years of being sealed. But this one, if the traps and Mercury are real, it explains why the tomb wasn't looted. Nobody dared. There's another layer here. If all the stories are true, it means the ancient Chinese record keepers weren't just making things up. Their history books are more reliable than we thought. That would be huge, because it would mean we should trust their other stories too. Stuff about inventions, battles, old rulers, maybe even the more magical sounding parts. But what if the legends are only half right? What if the Mercury is there, but not in rivers? What if the crossbows are there, but long since broken? It wouldn't make the tomb any less impressive. It would just mean the truth is somewhere between fact and fantasy. And here's where it gets even more interesting. If everything is true, then the tomb is a time capsule. A perfectly preserved slice of ancient China, sealed off from the world. Opening it would be like stepping into another reality. You'd see colours, smells, objects, even air that nobody has breathed for over 2 millennia. But that's risky. The moment you let in modern air, the balance shifts. Paint flakes off. Metals start to tarnish. Even the smallest touch can cause damage. It's a one-way door. Once you open it, you can't close it again. Now let's look at the big picture. If the tomb is exactly as described, what does that teach us? First, that ancient people were capable of things we still struggle to explain. We think of technology as something new, but engineering, chemistry, organization, those skills have deep roots. Second, it shows how much humans are willing to invest in the idea of immortality, not just for themselves, but for their leaders, their families, their beliefs. The tomb becomes a kind of monument to hope and to fear. Third, it reminds us that history is full of surprises. Sometimes the wildest stories are the ones that turn out to be true. The line between legend and reality gets fuzzy. Let's get philosophical. If the tomb is everything the records say, then it's both a wonder and a warning. It's a marvel of human creativity and a sign of human limits. The emperor wanted to live forever, but all his power couldn't save him. He's still there, locked away, while the world keeps turning above. And there's a lesson for us too. Sometimes, the things we build to last forever end up trapping us. The emperor built his tomb to keep death out, but in the end, it kept him in. It's a paradox, trying to beat time by stopping it. But time always wins. Dust settles, walls crack, even bronze and Mercury change given enough centuries. So, what would it mean if the tomb's secrets were revealed? It would change our view of history, yes. It would show what was possible in the ancient world. But it would also remind us of the cost, the labour, the lives given, the risks taken, the need for caution. And here's something else to think about. If the tomb is really that dangerous, that full of traps and poison, maybe that was the point. Maybe the emperor wanted the world to hesitate, to think twice before breaking in, to wait until the time was right, or never come at all. If all the legends are true, then what lies underground isn't just treasure. It's a challenge, a puzzle, a story that's still being told even now. And that's what makes it so fascinating. The tomb is there, the stories are there, the evidence is piling up, but the answer, the real answer, is still sealed away. Maybe someday we'll have the technology to explore it safely. Maybe we'll find ways to protect the art, the metals, the colours, the air itself. Maybe we'll walk through those passages, see the rivers gleaming, the stars shining on the ceiling. Or maybe we won't. Maybe the tomb will stay sealed for another century, or more. Either way, the idea sticks with you. What if it's all true? What if the world's greatest tomb is even greater than we imagine? What if there are wonders underground that nobody alive today has ever seen? It's possible. That's what keeps people guessing. That's what draws scientists, dreamers, and storytellers to this mystery. Not just the hope of riches or fame, but the chance to touch something real, something ancient, something that connects us to a world both familiar and strange. In the end, the truth about the tomb is still waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for the right hands. And maybe, just maybe, waiting for us to ask the right questions. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because whatever we find, if we ever do, it won't just be about the past. It'll be about who we are now, about what we value, about how we balance curiosity with respect and wonder with caution. Until then, the question stands. What if it's all true? What would you do with that knowledge? Would you rush in, or would you wait? Would you open the door, or would you let the mystery last a little longer? That's the puzzle. That's the story. And as long as the tomb remains closed, the legend will keep growing. Maybe that's the real magic, the power to keep us dreaming, long after the builders are gone. Let's leave the tomb itself for a moment and talk about the person at the centre of all this, the emperor inside. Qin Shi Huang. He's not just a name in a history book. He was a real man with real fears, dreams, and a level of ambition that shaped an entire country. If you want to understand why the tomb was built the way it was, you have to understand him. Because everything about that underground world, the warriors, the rivers, the stars on the ceiling, comes back to who he was and what he believed. Start with his early years. Nobody is born an emperor. Qin Shi Huang began life as Yingzheng. He became king of the Xin state when he was only 13 years old. Picture that. 13. Most kids today are worried about school, friends, maybe video games. He was handed a kingdom at an age when most of us are just figuring out how to talk to adults. But he didn't just survive, he took control, he listened to his advisors, but he also made his own decisions. By the time he was in his 20s, he was already showing signs of the ruler he'd become, strict, clever, and absolutely determined. China at that time wasn't one country. It was a patchwork of warring states. Each one had its own king, its own laws, and its own armies. Constant fighting. Nobody trusted anyone else. It was like a high-stakes game, and the rules kept changing. Qin Shi Huang wanted to change that. He wanted to end the chaos. He looked at the map and saw not a collection of rivals, but a single land, united under his rule. That idea wasn't common back then. Most leaders wanted to defend what they had. He wanted to bring everyone together, even if it meant war. That's exactly what he did. Step by step, battle by battle, he conquered the other states. It took almost a decade. By the age of 38, he had done something nobody else had managed. He unified the country. No more small kingdoms. No more endless wars between neighbours. One nation, one emperor. That's where the name Qin Shi Huang comes from. Qin is the name of his home state, and Shi Huang means first emperor. He wanted everyone to know this was a fresh start, a new era. He didn't stop there. He set out to change almost everything about how the country worked. New laws, standard weights and measures, even the writing system. Before him, different regions used different ways to write Chinese characters. Imagine trying to run a country where people in one area can't read what people in another area write. He forced everyone to use the same script. That's a huge deal. It meant messages, laws, and orders could spread quickly, and people would understand them. It created a sense of unity that had never existed before. He also built roads, lots of them. Straight, wide roads that let his armies and messengers travel faster than ever. He standardized coinage, so trade became easier. But it wasn't just about making things run smoothly. It was about control. He wanted to know what was happening in every corner of his empire, and he wanted everyone to know who was in charge. Then there's the Great Wall. The part we see today is mostly from later dynasties, but the original idea came from him. The northern borders were always at risk, from invasions. Instead of fighting the same battles again and again, he ordered walls to be built, connecting older ones and creating a barrier that stretched for hundreds of miles. It wasn't just a defense, it was a statement. This is the edge of my world. Beyond this is danger. Inside is order. But ruling such a huge land wasn't easy. There were always threats, rebellions, plots, enemies who wanted the old ways back. Qin Shi Huang became more and more strict as he got older. Harsh laws, severe punishments. He believed that strong rules kept the peace. Some people hated him for it. Others saw him as the only person who could hold everything together. He was both feared and respected, sometimes at the same time. This fear of losing control shaped the rest of his life. As he aged, he started worrying about what would happen after he died. In ancient China, the idea of the afterlife was powerful. People believed that the dead could influence the world of the living, and Emperor's spirit, if properly honoured and protected, could keep watching over the land. That's where the tomb comes in. It wasn't just a place to bury a king. It was a way to keep his power going, even after death. He became obsessed with staying alive. He sent out expeditions to distant lands, searching for magical herbs and potions that promised eternal life. Alchemists came to his court, offering pills and powders. He tried them all, even though some of them made him sick. Ironically, the very things meant to save him probably shortened his life. Mercury, for example. It was seen as a cure, but it's actually poison. He took it anyway, hoping for a miracle. Think about the mindset this creates. You're the most powerful person in the world. You've changed history, but you're still human, still afraid of what comes next. That fear, mixed with ambition, shaped his final years. He wanted a tomb that would protect him forever, not just from robbers, but from the chaos. He'd spent his life fighting. He wanted to rule in death the same way he did in life, completely, without challenge. This is why the tomb is so important. It's not just a monument, it's a symbol of his need for control. Every detail, the soldiers, the rivers, the traps, reflects the way he ruled. Order, precision, power. Even the way the tomb was built shows this. Thousands of workers, organised into teams, each one with a job, strict rules, no mistakes allowed. Punishment for failure was brutal. The same discipline that built the empire built the tomb. There's another layer here. In ancient Chinese belief, the emperor was the son of heaven. He wasn't just a political leader, he was the link between earth and the heavens. The tomb had to match that role. That's why the ceiling is said to show the night sky. It's not just decoration, it's a way of saying, I belong to both worlds. The rivers and mountains inside the tomb, they're a miniature version of the empire, a world within a world. Now let's talk about the end of his life. Qin Shi Huang died while on a tour of his empire. He was far from the capital, checking on his lands, making sure everything was running the way he wanted. Some say he died suddenly, others think he was already sick. Either way, his death was kept secret at first. The officials didn't want news to spread. They worried about unrest, so they brought his body home in secret, hiding the smell with carts of fish. It's a strange detail, but it shows how much they feared what might happen if the emperor's death became public too soon. When they finally announced his death, the country was thrown into confusion. His son took over, but didn't have the same strength or respect. Uprisings started almost right away. The empire he'd built began to fall apart. Within a few years the dynasty was gone. New rulers took over, but the tomb remained, sealed and untouched. Here's what's interesting, the tomb was finished before he died. Construction started almost as soon as he became king. For decades, workers dug, carved, shaped and built. Some people spent their whole lives working on it. When he died, the tomb was ready. The burial ceremony was probably huge. Rituals, music, offerings. The most powerful man in the world laid to rest in a chamber designed to last forever. But there's a dark side. The records talk about workers being sealed inside so the secrets wouldn't get out. Concubines and servants buried alive to serve the emperor in death. The same control that held the empire together also brought suffering to those closest to him. That's the flip side of absolute power. Nobody could say no. After the tomb was sealed, a strange thing happened. The site disappeared from the public mind. It wasn't forgotten, not exactly. But nobody tried to break in. There aren't stories of tomb robbers getting rich from the emperor's grave. Maybe people were too scared. Maybe the legends about traps and poison worked. Or maybe there was respect, a sense that this place was different from all the others. What about the emperor's body? That's still a mystery. If the tomb's defences worked, and the chamber stayed sealed, it's possible his remains are still there, mostly untouched. Some scientists think the bronze and the dry conditions might have kept his body in remarkable shape. Others believe time, moisture and Mercury did their work anyway. Nobody knows for sure. But here's something else to think about. The story of his death is also the story of what came after. The empire he built didn't last, but his dream did. Later dynasties copied his methods. The way he organised the country set the pattern for 2,000 years. The writing system he pushed became the foundation of modern Chinese. Even the idea of a single unified China comes from him. Yet, in the end, his biggest project, the tomb, became a symbol of silence. Nobody entered, nobody disturbed it. Centuries passed. Wars came and went. New capitals rose and fell. The mound stayed quiet, holding its secrets. Some people say that's fitting. Qin Shi Huang wanted control over everything, even his own death. He got his wish. But in doing so, he removed himself from history. Other tombs were robbed, their treasures scattered. His stayed closed, preserved, but lonely. There's a lesson here about power and legacy. You can build walls, armies and wonders, but you can't control what people remember. The Emperor's tomb is legendary, but the man inside is still a question mark. Was he a tyrant? A genius? Both? The evidence is there, but it's locked away, just out of reach. And then there's the question of time. How much does it take to erase a life? For Qin Shi Huang, the answer seems to be never completely, but always a little. The world above his tomb changed over and over, but the stories about him survived. They grew, shifted, and turned into legend. His tomb helped with that. As long as it stayed sealed, the mystery stayed alive. It's strange, isn't it? The man who wanted to rule forever became a mystery instead. We know so much about him, his conquests, his laws, his building projects. But the most personal details, the things that show what he really cared about, are still hidden below ground. Maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe he wanted to be remembered, but only on his own terms. Or maybe he was just like everyone else, hoping his life would matter, even after he was gone. If you look at what's left behind, you see both the glory and the cost. The terracotta warriors, the massive mound, the untouched chamber, they're all proof of what one person can do with enough power. But the sealed doors, the silent passageways, the workers who never left, they're reminders of the limits of that power. And really, that's the heart of the story. Qin Shi Huang built an empire that outlasted him, but he also built a prison he couldn't escape. Even in death he tried to control his fate, but time, nature, and curiosity keep knocking at the door. So we're left with questions. What does it mean to want to last forever? Is it worth the cost? Does trying to hold on to everything just lead to being forgotten in a different way? The Emperor's tomb doesn't give easy answers. It just sits there, waiting, quiet and heavy with secrets. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because the story isn't finished. The tomb is sealed. But the world keeps changing. New tools, new science, and new ways of thinking might someday open the door. When that happens, we might find treasures, answers, or just more mysteries. But for now, the silence continues. The Emperor's life and death are woven into the soil of northern China. His story is both a warning and a wonder, a reminder that even the greatest power can't control what comes next. The world moves on, legends grow, but the truth waits just out of reach, in the darkness below. And after all that noise, all that building, all that ambition, what's left is a kind of peace, a stillness that's lasted for centuries. The man who tried to command everything now rests in silence. The world above changes, but the story inside that tomb remains untouched. As the centuries pass, the lines between man, myth, and memory blur. The Emperor's tomb is more than just a grave. It's a mirror for our own hopes and fears. We look at it and see questions about power, about life and death, about what we leave behind. And maybe that's the real legacy. Not just the empire or the warriors or the myths, but the questions that keep us wondering, the silence that keeps us listening, the mystery that makes us pause and think, even after all this time. From the day he was buried, the world grew quieter around that mound of earth. No armies, no crowds, just the slow settling of dust and the long patient wait for someone to care enough to ask what's really inside. That's the story of Qin Shi Huang's life and death, a story of greatness and loss, ambition and caution, a story that still hasn't reached its end. And soon, as we move from the emperor's death to the long silence that followed, you'll see how the tomb became not just a place but a legend, a mystery that endures as the world above keeps turning. It's strange how a place can go from being the centre of everything to almost disappearing. That's what happened after the emperor's tomb was sealed. For a while, the world was in chaos. The dynasty he created fell apart. New rulers took over, old enemies came back, and the capital city changed hands. But through all of that, the tomb itself stayed quiet. No big crowds, no one rushing to break it open. It's almost like the whole country agreed to let it sit there, untouched. You might expect that. With so much treasure and so many legends, someone would have tried to break in. Robbers were everywhere in ancient times. Tomb raiding was practically its own industry in China. People dug into noble graves for gold, jade, and anything valuable. Some tombs got looted just a few years after they were sealed. Others lasted a bit longer, but almost none survived for centuries. The emperor's tomb is an exception. For over 2,000 years, there's no record of anyone breaking through, not even a rumour of someone sneaking in and making it out alive. Why? That's the mystery. Part of it might be fear. The stories about traps and poison kept people away. Sima Qian's record made it sound like the tomb was more dangerous than a battlefield. There were tales of crossbows that could still fire, rivers of poison, and curses on anyone who disturbed the emperor's rest. Whether or not those stories were true, they did their job. They made the place seem off-limits. But it wasn't just fear. Respect played a role too. In China, there was a strong belief in letting the dead rest. Disturbing a grave, especially one belonging to a ruler, was seen as a huge offence. The emperor was more than just a king. He was the son of heaven. Messing with his tomb wasn't just stealing, it was inviting disaster, both in this life and the next. The land around the tomb changed hands many times. Armies marched across it. Farmers tilled the soil. New cities rose and fell nearby. But nobody dug down. There's almost no evidence of serious attempts to dig into the mound. A few shallow pits here and there. Maybe some treasure hunters poked round the edges. But the main chamber, still sealed, deep underground. This silence didn't happen by accident. Later dynasties made laws against tomb robbing, especially for royal graves. Even in times of war, when chaos made everything fair game, the emperor's tomb stayed safe. It's possible local officials kept an eye on things. Maybe there were patrols. Maybe people in the area saw it as their duty to protect the site. Over time, the mound became less a target and more a landmark. It blended into the landscape. Just another hill, but with a legend underneath. What about the local people living nearby? They must have known what was under their feet. Oral traditions passed down stories. Some families claimed to be descendants of workers or soldiers who guarded the tomb. Old superstitions warned against digging too deep. Kids dared each other to touch the mound at night, then ran home spooked. The site became wrapped in layers of myth. Some said strange lights appeared on certain nights. Others said you could hear music or voices if you listened closely. Most people kept their distance. Every now and then, a new ruler would show interest in the old tomb. They'd send surveyors or priests to check on it, make an offering, mark the spot on new maps. But nobody went further. The place had become a legend. In a way, the emperor's plan worked. He wanted protection, and he got it. Not just from traps and poison, but from human habit and belief. It's easy to forget how rare this is. In other parts of the world, ancient tombs didn't get the same respect. The pyramids in Egypt, for example, were looted again and again. By the time archaeologists reached them, most treasures were long gone. The same thing happened in the Valley of the Kings. Only a few tombs like Tutankhamun's escaped robbers, and that was mostly by accident. But in China, the emperor's mound stayed closed. Even when new emperors came to power, they built their own tombs nearby, but left the old one alone. Sometimes they even tried to copy it. Later, tombs have similar layouts: buried chambers, guarding statues, complex traps. But none have the same reputation. None are as untouched. The silence around the tomb also meant that the details faded from memory. People remembered the stories, but the facts blurred. How big was the chamber? Where was the entrance? Was there really a map of the empire inside? Over centuries, even the location of the main entrance got lost. The mound was there, but nobody knew exactly how to get in. The workers who built it were long gone. The secrets went with them. Records from later dynasties sometimes mention repairs to the mound or ceremonies held nearby. But there's no sign that anyone tried to open the main tomb. Even during times of famine or war, when people were desperate, the mound stayed closed. It's almost as if the whole country agreed, without saying a word, to let that one place be. You can see this in the way the site changed over time. At first, it was surrounded by walls and gates. Guards stood watch. Later, those walls crumbled. The guards went away. Nature took over. Trees grew on the mound. Grass covered the stones. The tomb became part of the landscape, a hill among many. But the legend never completely faded. Fast forward a few hundred years. New dynasties rose and fell. China changed. New capitals, new rulers, new wars. But nobody touched the mound. It outlasted kingdoms and empires. It survived invasions by armies from the north, the south, even from outside China. The Mongols came and went. The Ming and the Qing built cities and palaces nearby. Still, the tomb remained sealed. It wasn't until the 20th century that serious interest returned. Archaeologists started looking at the site with new eyes. They used modern tools, ground-penetrating radar, soil tests, aerial photos. They mapped the mound and the area around it. They found evidence of walls, moats, and even roads leading toward the old entrance, but the main chamber stayed untouched. What's interesting is how modern technology started to reveal things that old stories got right. When they tested the soil, they found Mercury, just as the ancient texts described. When they used radar, they found empty spaces and structures deep underground. It was like the past and the present finally started talking to each other. But even with all this new knowledge, the silence continued. The government decided not to open the main tomb. Not yet. The risks were too high: danger to workers, damage to the artifacts, loss of history. So the chamber stayed sealed, just as it had for centuries. The world kept turning, but the tomb remained locked away. This long silence makes the emperor's tomb different from almost every other ancient site. Most monuments get changed by time, robbed, rebuilt, ruined. This one was protected by its own reputation. It became a symbol, not just of a ruler's power, but of patience, waiting, watching, letting time do its work. What does all this mean for us now? The silence isn't just about tomb robbers or lost treasures. It's about the way people treat the past. Sometimes the greatest respect you can show is to leave something undisturbed, to let the story stay hidden until the right moment. There's another layer to this silence, one that says something about human nature. We're curious. We want to know what's behind the door, what's buried in the darkness. But sometimes curiosity has to wait. The tomb's long silence is a kind of lesson in patience. It's a reminder that not every secret is meant to be revealed right away. And yet the silence isn't empty. It's full of meaning. Every generation that walked past the mound, every child who heard the stories, added something. The legend grew, the questions multiplied. People wondered what treasures might be inside, or what dangers. The silence became a part of the story, just as real as the warriors or the rivers of metal. For historians, this long silence is both a frustration and a gift. On one hand, there's so much we don't know. The main tomb could hold answers to big questions about ancient China, its art, its science, its beliefs. But on the other hand, the fact that the site has been untouched means that, if it's ever opened, we'll see something truly unique. Almost a time capsule, preserved by 2,000 years of patience. You can see how this shapes our view of the past. The unopened tomb stands as a kind of gateway, one that connects legend, history, and the present. It's a place where questions hang in the air, waiting for answers. It makes us think about what it means to remember, to forget, and to choose when to act. Sometimes I wonder if the silence around the tomb is more powerful than anything that could be found inside. The waiting, the not knowing, keeps the story alive in a way that seeing everything might not. It turns the mound into a mirror, one that reflects not just the emperor's dreams, but our own hopes and fears about time, memory, and what lasts. There's also something comforting about it. In a world where so much gets lost or destroyed, this one place stayed safe, not by accident but by choice. People decided generation after generation to leave it alone, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of respect, sometimes simply because the legend was bigger than any treasure. The silence also protected the details. Paint that would flake off in minutes if exposed to air is still safe in the dark. Wooden structures that should have rotted away might still be waiting, untouched. Even the emperor's remains, whatever state they're in, have been spared the fate of so many other ancient rulers, looted, scattered, forgotten. The world around the tomb changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Empires rose, fell, and rose again. Technology leaped forward. New religions, new languages, new ways of thinking came and went. But the mound just sat there, through drought and flood, through war and peace. People sometimes ask if the silence will last forever. Probably not. Sooner or later, the urge to know will win out. New technology will make it possible to open the tomb safely. Maybe a future generation will finally see what's been hidden for so long. But until then, the silence is its own kind of answer. It says that some mysteries are worth waiting for, that patience can be powerful, that sometimes the best way to honour the past is to let it keep its secrets a little longer. And this is where it gets really interesting. The story of the tomb's long silence isn't just about what's underground. It's about us, our choices, our willingness to wonder, to wait, and to respect what we don't fully understand. The emperor tried to control everything, even after death. But in the end, it's the patience and restraint of countless people. Robbers who decided not to dig, rulers who passed new laws, villagers who told their children to leave the mound alone, that kept the secret safe. This long quiet period, with its layers of myth and respect, has become part of the tomb's legacy. It's a silence filled with questions, with stories, with dreams about what might be. It's a silence that keeps the past alive, not as a fixed story, but as a living mystery. As the world keeps changing and new discoveries get made, that silence gets heavier, more meaningful. It holds everything that's come before and everything that might still come. The unopened tomb is a reminder that some stories are bigger than any one person, bigger than any treasure. Some stories last because no one dares to finish them, and as the centuries pass, the silence itself becomes a kind of answer. It tells us that there's value in waiting, in honouring what we can't easily reach. It reminds us that the past is always close, always shaping the present, even when it's hidden beneath a quiet hill. Soon, we'll move from this long silence to what it means for us now, what we can learn from all this patience, all this waiting, all these secrets kept safe in the dark. The story isn't over. The silence is just another chapter, waiting for someone to turn the page. There's something almost peaceful about a mystery that's been left alone for so long. The Emperor's hidden chamber sits under the earth, untouched by light or air, quietly holding on to its secrets. Years turn into centuries. The outside world spins and changes, but deep below nothing moves. No one digs, no one dares. It's like the whole landscape is frozen in a single moment, waiting for a signal that never comes. But why does this matter to us? Why do we care about a mound of dirt, a locked chamber, and a story that hasn't had a new chapter in over 2 millennia? Maybe it's because we see something of ourselves in that long patience, in the urge to solve the puzzle, but also in the decision to wait, to respect the boundary between what's known and what's still a dream. Think about all the things that get lost with time, languages, cities, even whole civilizations. Usually the past is like a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. We find broken bits and try to guess the big picture. But here, with the Emperor's tomb, the pieces are probably still there. The puzzle is complete, just locked away. That's rare. That's special. There's a kind of hope in that. Imagine if we could see the paintings on the walls, the carvings, the treasures exactly as they were left. Not faded or ruined, but fresh. Like stepping into a room where everyone just walked out a minute ago. Most ancient sites can't offer that. There's always damage, always loss. Here, though, the story might still be whole, just hidden. But hope has to live alongside caution. There's a reason nobody's broken in, even with modern tools and science. It's not just about protecting objects. It's about honouring something bigger, an idea, a memory, a piece of humanity's story that's too important to risk for quick answers. Picture the mound on a quiet morning, mist rising from the fields. Maybe a farmer walks by, glances at the hill and keeps moving. Maybe a child asks what's under there, and an elder tells a story. The tomb isn't just a place, it's part of the rhythm of daily life for people nearby. It's both ordinary and full of wonder. Just another hill, but also the heart of a legend. What's strange is how the unknown can feel so steady, even comforting. Usually mysteries make people restless. We want to dig, to search, to know. But sometimes the mystery itself becomes a kind of anchor. It gives people something to talk about, to imagine, to pass down. The longer it stays unsolved, the bigger it grows in our minds. Even for scientists and historians, there's a kind of relief in waiting. The first time someone opens the sealed chamber, it's a one-shot deal. There's no redo. If they get it wrong, if they let in air or moisture that ruins the paintings or the wood, that's it. The story is lost forever. That's a heavy responsibility, maybe too heavy for one generation to carry alone. So the world waits, hoping for new technology, better science, or simply a clearer answer about how to move forward. There are other reasons, too. Some people see the mound as a sacred place, not just a historical site, but a spot that deserves respect no matter what's inside. Others see it as a lesson in humility, a reminder that even with all our knowledge there are limits. Some doors aren't meant to be opened just because we can. This patience isn't easy. Now and then there are calls to hurry up. Open the tomb, people say. Let's see what's inside. Why keep waiting? It's tempting, especially in a world where information moves so fast and everyone wants answers right away. But when you look at what's at stake, a record of a vanished world untouched by time, it's clear why the wait continues. Some mysteries are too important to rush. And there's something else. The longer the mound stays closed, the more it starts to stand for something beyond itself. It's not just about one emperor or one country anymore. It's about trust, about faith that the right moment will come, even if we don't know when, about believing that waiting can be just as meaningful as action. In a way, the unopened chamber is a gift to the future. We don't know what tomorrow's scientists will invent. Maybe in 50 years they'll have tools that can see inside without breaking the seal. Maybe someone will find a way to preserve the paint, the wood, the delicate things that would crumble now. By holding back, we're giving those future people a chance to experience something we can only dream about. That idea of leaving something for the next generation runs deep in human history. People plant trees they'll never see grow tall. They write messages for people who aren't born yet. They build monuments, knowing they'll be ruined someday. The Emperor's Chamber is like that, but on a bigger scale. It's a message in a bottle, buried deep, waiting for someone who's ready. And maybe that's the real meaning of the long silence. It's not just about secrets and traps and ancient gold. It's about the power of restraint, the courage to say, we don't have to know everything right now, the wisdom to let the past rest, even as we wonder and imagine. There's also a lesson about change. The world has shifted so much since the mound was first sealed. New ideas, new rulers, even whole new ways of looking at time and death. But through it all, the mound has stayed the same. It's a link to a world that's gone, but not forgotten. A reminder that some things can last if people care enough to let them. For those who study history, the unopened chamber is both a frustration and a promise. So many questions hang in the air. What do the paintings look like? What did the emperor really want for his afterlife? Did the builders leave messages, warnings, or even jokes for those who'd come after? Every answer could change what we know about an entire civilization, but every delay makes the moment of discovery matter even more. As time passes, the story grows. Every new generation adds its own hopes, fears, and dreams to the legend. Some see the mound as a test, a challenge from the past to the present. Others see it as a comfort, proof that patience still has a place in our world, and maybe that's the most important part. In a noisy, restless world, the Emperor's hidden chamber offers a kind of stillness, a moment of quiet in the middle of everything, a chance to pause, breathe, and remember that not all questions need answers right away. So, as night settles in and the world goes quiet, the mound waits. The secrets stay safe, wrapped in darkness and time. The story continues, not with shouts and discoveries, but with patience, wonder, and the hope that someday, when the time's right, the past will speak again. Until then, the silence is its own kind of treasure, a gentle reminder that sometimes the best stories are the ones that let us dream, imagine, and rest in the mystery. May your own dreams tonight be peaceful, and may the secrets of the past bring you comfort as you drift into sleep.